Welcome to the FP&A Trends Webinar. I'm excited to talk about unleashing the power of FP&A Change Management for Analytical Transformation. I'm so excited to say we got 574 registrants from 63 countries around the world. Truly global thought leadership. Okay, so I'm going to start with my agenda. And here's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about change management in FP&A, so some key trends and challenges. I'm going to talk about 5 key ingredients for successful FP&A analytical transformation. My amazing panel is then going to talk about the importance of change management, a step-by-step approach to analytical transformation. We're going to talk about FP&A and digital modernization. And importantly, we're going to bring it back to conclusions and recommendations and really want you to all think about, hey, what are some actionable steps you can all take as you undergo your transformation journey? Importantly, we're also going to talk about any questions you have. So I invite you to put your questions in the chat. There's in the question boxes. And what we will do is we'll answer some questions live, and we commit to answering any questions we do not get to in this live webinar in writing. So really, really appreciate the questions, and they always add a lot to these amazing webinars. So I'm going to invite my amazing panel to join me on camera. Okay, fantastic. So welcome everybody. I'm going to start with Karina Williams. So she's the business unit CFO at Veolia Water Technologies and Solutions. She's had over 5 years as a business unit CFO. She has a global team of over 35 employees, and she's based out of New York. Welcome, Karina.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Excellent. Okay, next I have Pedro Thina. So he is the VP Finance Global CFO for Honeywell, over $3.5 billion business, and he's leading the strategic and digital transformation agenda for the business. So amazing to have really practical experience. And Pedro's based out of Houston. Welcome, Pedro.
Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon for everyone in the call. Welcome from Houston.
Absolutely. Okay, and last but not least, I have Greg Volpe. So he's the Solution Marketing Director at Workday. He has over 26 years of experience in corporate performance management, and he really works with FP&A teams to transform their business planning processes with leading technology. Greg is based out of Boston in the USA, so welcome, Greg.
Yeah, hi, thanks everyone. Nice to work with you this morning, and looking forward to the session.
Fantastic. Welcome, panel. And I will invite you to come back on camera. So thank you for the introductions. Okay, so next thing, I really want to thank our sponsor, Workday. Really important to have a great sponsor like Workday for this global thought leadership webinar. I'm always amazed at this slide. 30 cities, 16 countries, 4 continents. I really congratulate Larissa and the team for their amazing work creating thought leadership around the globe. Amazing to see this kind of thought leadership. In the middle of the page, you see FP&A Insights, a digital community, over 650,000 readers. So best practices, an FP&A Club LinkedIn group, and FP&A Trends Digest. And so important for us to all keep the pulse on what's going on in the industry. So really love the work there. And last but not least, FP&A education, research, and consulting. So best practice workshops, FP&A consultancy, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and then FP&A surveys and research. And I particularly enjoyed the surveys, which really show what are the key trends as we continue to evolve in 2023. So a little bit of housekeeping. So it's a 1-hour webinar. We have 2 polls, and when I launch the polls, I really invite you to answer the polls. Really love the interaction we get from our amazing community. As I mentioned, we're going to have the Q&A session, so please send your questions in. And the presentation will be available on handouts, and we will send a recording. After the webinar, we really appreciate your feedback and really take it seriously and try to improve our webinars and bring our best practices based on your feedback. So thank you in advance for your completion of those. So here are going to be the 4 presentations that we go through. So I'm going to go through the key ingredients. Karina is going to go through the importance of change management. Pedro is going to go through a step-by-step approach to analytical transformation. And Greg is going to talk about digital modernization. And as we go through these, we're going to bring these together and we're going to have some fantastic discussions. Okay, so for me, I spent almost 20 years in finance. The majority of that was in FP&A and really in some senior leadership positions. And for me, what I tried to do is just say from my recollection and from my recent learnings, what are the things I would bring to an analytical transformation? So here's my 5 keys. So number 1, I always believe it starts and ends with leadership. Really, really important, right? A growth mindset from leadership, really being open to change. And I absolutely love this quote by legendary leadership guru, John C. Maxwell. Change is inevitable, growth is optional. And for me, whenever I've seen a true leadership commitment to an analytical transformation, right from start to finish and in between, that's where I've seen some serious success. So in my opinion, number 1, most important, starts and ends with leadership, and leadership having that growth mindset. Number 2, a clear strategy and defining that up front. So really taking the time to sit down as a committee, as a cross-functional group with your stakeholders and have a very, very clear strategy. A lot of times that strategy piece is often rushed, and that's where I've seen it fall down sometimes. Number 3, communicate, especially in this hybrid world that we're living in. Really important to focus on communication to different audiences, to different generations in different ways, email, voicemail, in person. And leaders who really understand the importance of over communication are really the ones, in my opinions, who have these successful transformation. Simon Sinek, another legendary leader in leadership, great leaders communicate and great communicators lead. So really the importance of communication cannot be underestimated. And I love this visual of everybody rowing together, right? A real collaborative approach and involving folks who will be doing the work. The last thing I'd want to see is for them to almost be handed a set of instructions. So for me, the best projects, the best analytical transformations I've ever seen have had involvement from many levels of the organization, many functions, and a true collaborative approach to map out the process, the timeline, the journey, and bring it all together. So that total teamwork across the team is super, super valuable. And last but not least, one of the most important things is just getting your data house in order. Really saying, have we invested enough time to ensure our data is in a good place as we undergo this analytical transformation? So just in summary, number 1, leadership commitment starts and ends, and I can't underestimate that. And I've actually seen one that went the other way because leadership was there at the beginning, but wasn't present and wasn't communicating throughout the process. Define a key strategy. Number 2, a clear strategy, I should say. Number 3, communicate. Number 4, a collaborative approach across the entire team. And number 5, get your data house in order. So really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to our esteemed panel as we go through this awesome webinar. So what I've done is I've done the key ingredients, and now I'm going to turn it over to Karina, and I invite Karina back on stage to talk about the importance of change management. So Karina, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ron. So just to reintroduce myself, my name is Karina Williams. I'm a business unit CFO for the past 5 years, a little bit over that. Been in finance my whole career. I lead a team of over 35, and I have a portfolio for about $1.3 billion annual revenue. I work for Veolia Water Technologies and Solutions. So if you don't know what we do, we have the ability, the engineering, and the know-how to clean water. So we treat water for a lot of customers, industrial customers, and municipalities. So it's quite exciting. You hear more and more about water and the importance of water in the news. So I'm quite passionate about what we do. And now I'm here today to talk about change management. I want to start talking about why change management is key. And to lead that off, I want to start with a quote, which goes, "The art of life is a constant readjustment to our surroundings." So I just want to repeat that because I'm really a big fan of this quote. The art of life is a constant readjustment to our surroundings. This is a quote by a Japanese scholar, and I think it's so true in life as well in work. And I want to elaborate a little bit more on why I think it's so important and what are the risks if we don't change and if we don't ask our teams to change. There's one of the risks on our teams and resources. we keep being asked to do more as finance professionals, especially in FP&A. I'm sure most of you, I know it's definitely true for me and my team. In the past 2 to 3 years, we've been asked to do a lot of detailed reporting on inflation, on price increases for our direct material and also on our pricing side. We've been recently asked within, especially this year, but it started late last year, cost of money is getting really expensive, and we've been asked to add more analytics on what that means for the company. How are we proactive about it? What do we do? The workload always increases. So if we don't do change management, if you don't critically look as to how we can reduce the workload, what do we do, how we should do it, we really don't have a good work-life balance. We really don't have the time to do what we should be doing because the workload just gets bigger. Then we also have the risk, if you don't do change management, to keep up with the times. I would be amiss to not mention AI when I talk about change management. I know we don't use it, I use it a lot privately, we don't use it yet in our work life, but we're starting to talk about it. We're working on evaluating different AI tools that we can actually use from a confidentiality perspective. And we start getting the questions, how do you want to use AI? What do you see the implications of AI in finance, FP&A? Change management is going to be key there to make sure we take everyone with us. And then lastly, on the softer side, in the past 3 years, life has changed a lot, especially work life. There's so much talk about it, some initial studies. What we know is that a lot of the softer conversations have been missing. We used to have water cooler conversations. We used to be able to pull junior employees just into meetings to watch us work, to learn a lot about the company. A lot of that is missing now. And also here, change management, the key is to make sure we reap the benefits from it and don't just fall into the pitfalls of this. Now I want to talk to you on the next page about just 5 items that are important to do effective change management. The number 1 is establishing a clear vision for the team. We need to have a purpose, we need to have goals, we need to have a whole story behind why we want to do certain change and then drive that story across. How we drive it across, Ron already talked about it, is really communicate. Over communicate, repeat the message over and over and over again. And I always say you have to repeat it so much until you feel everyone on your team is bored with the message. When everyone is so bored, they don't want to hear it anymore, they make jokes about it, and it becomes a thing they talk about, then they really know it and they've heard it plentiful to really embody the change and go from there. Then the next thing is engage the other stakeholders. It cannot just be you in a silo. Finance works with so many teams. We have business partners in operations and HR everywhere across the companies. Talk to them too. Talk to them about the change you want to drive and make sure they also talk to your team members about the same change so your team doesn't get reflecting messages. And then empower your team. Identify the key team members who really bought in, who are really excited about it, the early adopters, and empower them to drive the change and not just be part of the journey, but actually steering the change. Tell them about, ask them to be your spokespeople and really ask them to own the messaging on a daily basis. And then last but definitely not least, celebrate the successes. We tend to just focus on the problems, what doesn't work so well. Celebrate the successes as many times you can in as many ways. If it's emails, shout outs, on town halls and one-on-ones, any form of communication you can find, maybe your company has a points program, celebrate the successes that lead towards the change you want to see. If you really award people for what they want to do, they will change. And then on my last page, I want to talk about what's the end goal here? Why do we do this? Why is it so important to talk about the change management? So I want to talk about the important analytics, and I have another quote for you. Big data is not about the data. It's about the insights that can be derived from the data. And to me, if we do it right, we really can support our business partners and the business overall with better decision making. And that will have so many benefits. I listed a few there, but there's more that goes beyond this. Improved planning and forecasting, risk management, we always solve cost optimization. But if we really get change management right, if we critically think about how we do it, what do we do on a daily basis, how do we spend our time, then have a clear vision, over communicate on it, engage other stakeholders, empower the team, and then celebrate the successes, we really can get to something here. Thank you so much. And with this, I'm handing it over to Ron.
Fantastic, Karina. Super insightful. I wrote down a few things. Change is constant. I love how you shared 5 effective change management strategies. And I really like how you talked about, hey, when people are bored of the message, your communication is great. So I really like that's a good actionable advice for us as leaders. And you talked about celebrate. And I love how you talked about not just the big wins, but the small wins along the way. And then ultimately, how do you get to better decision making? So Karina, super insightful. And please stay on. I'm going to now run our first poll, and I invite everybody to participate. It always is a fantastic session when we have amazing participation. Okay, so I'm launching our first poll, and the poll is, what factors do you think are the most critical to driving successful change? So the 4 answers: leadership and culture, technology is number 2, skills is number 3, and process is number 4. So I invite you to continue voting. So far we have a clear leader. I'm not going to share what it is yet, but now the first option, leadership and culture, the second is technology, the third is skills, and the 4th is process. So I'm going to let it run for a few more seconds. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the great participation that we have so far. And now I'm going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the results. Okay, so Karina, I'd love you to comment on this. I mean, really overwhelmingly in the first bucket. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with this more. I think leadership and culture is so important to drive successful change, and I'm really passionate about, especially the culture topic. And it's really positive to see that most of the audience agrees with that.
Yeah, no, similarly here. I think it's amazing to see our panel has a really keen grasp on the fact that that leadership and the culture piece are super critical. So thank you all. Really appreciate you all participating in the polling. And Karina, thank you once again for your presentation. Okay, so now we're going to keep going. And I'm going to invite my panel to join me for a quick discussion. Okay, so the question I'm going to ask is, how can leaders, and I think it fits really well with the poll, develop a very clear vision that keeps up with technological advances in today's environment? So Karina, I'll come back to you first. Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I think, and I talked about it a little bit just in my presentation, I think having a vision is so important to drive change and to stay up to date with technological advances that we want to see. How to do that? I mean, I mentioned a few points again during my presentation, but I think in addition to that, I think it's just really important. The one point I want to emphasize, it's really important to pick people up, to stay up to date, and to really try it. Like, we have to lead by example. If you just preach something and just tell someone to do something without really trying it and buying into it, it's visible, and the change is just not going to be as effective because our teams pick up on that. So I think it's really important that we lead by example, and if you want to drive change, to live the change every day, all the time, and admit mistakes. Nobody's perfect. If you do something wrong, let's admit to it, and then let's make it a learning moment.
Amazing, amazing. Pedro, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Karina, what she said about leadership and communication. For me, two main aspects. Number one, make complexity simple and make it relevant, okay? I think, like, as leaders, we need to change. Sometimes it's overwhelming. You need to simplify, paint that picture, but also make it relevant, okay? So if I always think that if you can explain to your kids and they understand it, it's simple and it's clear. If not, then you are still overcomplicating things a little bit. And after making it simple and the complexity is understand that it's a journey. And as in every journey, there's going to be ups and downs. And it's not, you know, keeping strong and convinced and reinforcing that over the journey is important, because there's going to be good days and bad days. And that is part of the change process. So you can imagine that when they decide to leave Europe and discover Americas 500 years ago, I mean, that wasn't an easy journey, right? And they were thinking about turning around many times, okay? But they keep focused and they finally reached there, okay? And didn't stop there. It continued evolving and, you know, discovering what it was there. But it was a journey, okay? And it wasn't an easy one, okay? So all big things, they come with ups and downs.
Amazing. Greg?
Yeah, I think Karina and Pedro are spot on. I'll just mention and just repeat what Pedro said. I think keeping it relevant and allowing everyone to embrace the change and making sure that it's relevant to them. I think that will be probably most successful for any organization.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all. So I wrote down, try it, lead it by example. Karina, I love that you said that. Making complexity simple, which is very difficult, takes a lot of work. And I think that's a good guidance there to say, hey, can we explain it to our kids? And then, knowing in advance, lots of ups and downs along the way. And I think that was a brilliant analogy, Pedro. And then, Greg, I think reinforcing that, say, make it relevant and simple as well is super helpful. So thank you all. I will have another discussion in a minute. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to go to that third box, which is an approach to analytical transformation. And I'm going to invite Pedro back to the floor. Pedro, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah, so it's about change and driving simplicity in the complexity, but I'll start by introducing myself. I'm the global CFO for Honeywell Process Solutions. This is an automation provider for some of the biggest companies out there, like Shell, Aramco, Chevron, BSF, you name it. Let's start on the right-hand side to get to know me a little bit better. So I'm a big family person. I'm a big, I like having a life. I like enjoying what I love. So, it's over there you have my family. So Belén, my wife, and the two little boys, Javier, the little one, and Jose, the other one. I'm from Spain, as you can tell from my accent. Yeah, and I'm a big Real Madrid fan. So you need to find time for a lot of things. So that means that when you are in work, you need to make things linear and optimized. If we think about my career, very similar to many people in this webinar right now. I mean, over 20 years of experience, more than 17 different roles, 6 to 7, I think, different cities where I work. I've been based on. So, you take the right, you take the left, change is there, and this is what it's about, okay? Change, life is change, and I think that Karina already pointed out on that one. If we move to the next slide, yeah, probably you should convince some people 5 years ago about how necessary it is to change, but the context is in continuous evolution, and the events of the last 5 years has demonstrated that this is it, okay? That is here. It can hit you on one day to another, that it happens with the global pandemic. It can be evolving in a shorter period of time of 3-4 years, like the hyperinflation or the material shortages, or can be the result of a building trend over time, right? The sustainability, right? That's something that has been accelerating. So we cannot decide whether to change or not. That's a given. You can decide how to adapt and how to adopt it and how fast, okay? And that involves people, processes, and technologies. So if we move to the next slide, I would like to share my view on change management and how data and analytics is important there, okay? So I like thinking on change like a 5 stages process and understand how data is important in all of them. First one is to acknowledge the need to change. And for that, you need data to evaluate the impact and say, okay, this is relevant, we need to adopt it. Next is to agree on the scope. That means defining the timeline and defining the organizational and geographical and people impacted areas. And that again requires metrics. Next, obviously, you build a plan, okay? You cannot change without a plan. Every journey requires a route and it requires alternatives paths. So that means having resources, or means quantify resources, quantify effort, measure the progress towards the plan. And obviously, we have to have a vision, okay? That is the success criteria. What is the definition of success? How do we know that we reached to the point we were expecting? And that means having certain KPIs and having a management scorecard to understand if we got there or not, or how far we are. And last but not least, the most important part, you need to celebrate. I think Karina mentioned that clearly. Reflect and get ready for the next one, okay? Because that change is like a muscle. You exercise, you develop a muscle, but you need to celebrate the accomplishments that has been reached, because at the end of the day, it's a heavy lifting for the organizations. We need to make this a fun part of the day-to-day. If we move to the next slide, so I wanted to share the real life example that I wanted to mention here in the webinar. So let's visualize a company very similar to the companies that many of you work, highly complex company, thousands of customers, hundreds of thousands of SKUs, up to 100 different business units, what it means, go-to-market and technology roadmaps, and thousands of company costs and employees. So when you have that level of complexity and then you are facing changing forces, how do you ensure that you don't end up with, for instance, if we have 100 business units with 100 different solutions to change, right? That doesn't work. Okay, as an organization, you cannot have 100 different plans for how to adopt something. So you need to bring simplicity in that complexity, and there analytics and data plays a critical role. So in this case, this company, we are facing the generation change, we are facing the data dependency of our customers, the customer experience becoming more demanding and complex, and obviously investors, they continue to demand high return of investment, and by the way, they have more options than ever. And with the interest rates going to the roof, it becomes even more demanding because of the cost of capital. So that combination, how you face it. So what we did over here is, like, you have 100 different business units. Okay, how can we bring some consistency between them? And then you recognize that there are 4 main business models: a project business model, a service business model, a product one, and a software one. And basically, every single one of the 100 business units fall into one of the others. Okay. So when you do that, you are now moving from 100 solutions to 40 solutions. And how do you build those business models? What you're trying to do is not to constrain the business, but is to build a common infrastructure from a technology and process perspective, and a common ecosystem where everyone is going to be able to build a path, but a path that is consistent and is manageable. You obviously require leadership support and C-suite sponsorship. You require all that to be into place, and over communicating continuously, and define the end scenario. Okay, so that means that you start defining common definitions, single set of policies, a standard management operating system, common tools. So bring a standardization into the tool and the application landscape, organizational design, people definitions, goals and objectives, and KPIs. You bring all that. You bring the set, and then make sure that you don't try to approach this as a big bang kind of thing. You need to be testing and be using even before it's ready. Okay, like I think Elon Musk has mentioned many times that you don't automate things from the get-go. Okay, you do things, you optimize things, you learn from that, you keep optimizing, and once you think that you have something that it makes sense, you automate. So never go to a big bang. It's a journey, as we said. So here is just a representation of how this translated for the project business. Remember, we have 4, we moved from 100 to 4. For one of them, the project business, how the application landscape end up being. So you end up having a CRM solution that is common for everyone, a project lifecycle management, so customer technology, a project management system, so execution model, ERP, one single ERP, record keeping, and then you have common platform for training and KPIs. When you build that, you create the ecosystem for the 100 business, those that falls into here, to adapt and adopt change. I hope you found that interesting, and with that, I'll send it back to the panel.
Amazing. Thank you, Pedro. I really appreciate how you really shared a really practical experience. I loved your presentation, other than your Real Madrid logo. I'm a Barcelona fan, but I do want to take it back a little bit. So what was the big, and what was the biggest challenge as you went through this with a multinational organization? I'd love just to, quick feedback on that.
Probably you're going to be surprised by the answer, but it was learning to listen, okay? So thinking to that, we said that, for instance, for this project business, more than 25 different business units fall into this definition. So you're coming from having 25 different views of how to do business, and you're trying to get to a common view and be able to, once you have the common view, to implement. So that takes a huge effort of developing that listening muscle that in many organizations, after years of doing things in a certain way, is not there. So the biggest challenge was learn to listen and learn how to capture that and build something new.
Fantastic. No, I really appreciate that, because in a very practical scenario that you did, just that, ability, and we talked about leadership in the first poll, really being able to listen and bring that all together. So thank you, Pedro. Okay, so we're now going to go to our next poll, and I really appreciate the input as we went through the first one. So I'm going to launch my second poll. And the poll is, where do you think your organization will invest next to advance their analytical transformation? Okay, so the 4 are data architecture, Number 2 is established driver-based planning. Number 3 is integrated planning tools. And number 4 is artificial intelligence and machine learning prediction tools. So once again, the question is, where do you think your organization will invest next to advance their analytical transformation? Is it data architecture, establishing driver-based planning, integrated planning tools, and artificial and machine learning prediction tools? And Pedro, I will ask you to comment once I show it. I'll let the amazing attendees vote for a couple more seconds. There's some great, participation already. Fantastic, keep it going. Okay, good stuff. I'm gonna share the poll results. And Pedro, you can see, a little bit of a split here. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that the answers are a reflection of what is really the problematics that each of the companies are facing. So those companies are probably already past the structured data, the common data infrastructure, and starting to have driver-based planning. They're thinking more of AI and integrated planning tools. Those are a little bit lagging behind. They are emphasizing on the data and establishing the driver base. Basically, all the things are required. You cannot move to AI if you haven't fulfilled the others, and vice versa. So it's a little bit about a reflection of the different stages where each of the companies of our colleagues here in the poll might be right now. But all of them are relevant. It comes with the maturity stage of each of the companies, in my view.
Okay, fantastic. And for anyone who's driving or can't see the screen, what we had is data architecture was 34%, integrated planning tools was 34%, AI ML was 18%, and establishing driver-based planning was 14%. So it was really around that data architecture and integrated planning tools that really were the 34% and drove 2/3 of the answer. So thank you, everybody, for your fantastic participation in the poll, and thank you, Pedro, for your presentation and your feedback. Okay, so next, if my panel can join me on camera, I think it's going to be amazing. And the question I'm going to have here is, how can FP&A leaders play a pivotal role in advancing the analytical change management agenda in their respective organizations? And Greg, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to what Karina emphasized in her presentation, is empower the employees and find champions within every level of the organization. And I think that once you empower your employees and you find champions, we'll go back to the first question, it brings relevancy to the whole change. And again, I think that would probably drive the most success for change management.
Fantastic. Karina?
Yeah, I think focusing too on the role that finance has, we have this unique ability to touch the whole organization. We have operational business partners, HR, legal, marketing. There's barely any department we don't touch. So I think we really can be key in driving a bigger organizational change outside of finance for the whole company, because we influence so many people. We have so many conversations, and if we drive the same messages, I think we can really push the company and the change that we would like to see.
Excellent. Pedro?
Yeah, so I like thinking when you're driving analytics, like it's a team sport. If you try to pick the two most critical roles in the finance organization most of the time, which is the CFO and the FP&A lead, you could think like the CFO is kind of the heart from the financial team, and the FP&A is the brain, right? One without the other doesn't work. So you're trying to get something happen, you need both. So as Karina said, the FP&A team is connected to everyone, like your system in your body. So it's getting all the sensations, so everything that is happening, putting all that together and being able to keep running at the same time that you are changing something. So if you want to visualize those like a heart and a brain operating together, that's the kind of symbiosis that you need to have in order to drive analytics journey. You cannot hand over that to the FP&A and say run with this, or the opposite. They both together need to work as a tandem.
Okay, thank you, panel. I love how you talked about, Greg talked about empowering the teams and really bringing champions to the forefront, because that really brings the energy that really makes successful projects. And Karina talked about the 360-degree view that finance has. It's a wonderful, unique perspective to help rally the organization. And I love Pedro's analogy of the heart and the brain, and saying that the CFO is the heart and the FP&A is the brain. So I think we bring both heart and brain, but I love the answers to say, how can we move this journey forward. So thank you, panel. Really appreciate it. And I'll have you back on in a few minutes. Okay, so last but not least, what I'm going to have now is I'm going to have Greg talk about FP&A and digital modernization. So Greg, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. So again, my name is Greg Volpe, a director of solution marketing for Workday. And as you might know, change management is a pretty big topic with multiple areas that you can speak to. And you heard so many great insights from Karina and Pedro so far. So, you'll see in the next slide, people, process, technology. In my quick section, I'm going to speak to the technology piece, and specifically what we see with FP&A teams as they move to a more modern technology, or what we sometimes refer to as digital modernization. And the world is changing, right? As Pedro mentioned, right? And we've all experienced, as you probably agree, there is a new reality. And as global markets continue to evolve rapidly with some degree of unpredictability, FP&A teams need to become even more strategic than they are today to keep up with this change. But what we've seen is that many organizations struggle to keep up with the rate of change. And when the organization cannot process change at the rate it's occurring, we call it the acceleration gap. And this acceleration gap is the difference between the pace of change and an organization's ability to keep up with that pace. And there are many reasons for that. One of the most effective ways to close the acceleration gap is through digital transformation or digital strategy, which is the adoption of more modern financial and planning technology, which will ultimately improve business outcomes. And what we've seen, we've seen feedback that supports this. So you'll see that on the next slide. In some recent surveys by my organization, Workday, there was acknowledgement that there's some good reasons to move more quickly with a digital transformation strategy. In one of the studies, we found that 91% of 91% of respondents agree modern technology tools, as an example, can help an organization become more flexible and adaptive in their planning. This was just one metric from the study, but the overall conclusion was that there was an agreement across most organizations that a digital transformation is likely imperative. But why? What are the factors that are driving many organizations, and specifically FP&A teams, to move to a more modern technology and ultimately close the acceleration gap? Well, there are many reasons for that, and I'll touch on just a couple in the next slide. Economic uncertainty, right? So as discussed already, the current state of the economy and ongoing market volatility is driving the need for more insight and agility. Typically, legacy systems like spreadsheets and disconnected proprietary systems lack the flexibility, unification, and automation capabilities of modern technology solutions, which allow organizations to anticipate and respond to a faster and more dynamic rate of change. And the need for technology to support better performance and scalability is another factor. This is due to the requirement by FP&A teams for faster insights into data, as Karina mentioned, more multidimensional analytics, and the need to support higher volumes of data, which is being driven by the growing use of operational data in analytics, as well as embracing new AI and ML tech capabilities that require different external data sets to drive more accurate forecasts and analytics. And as you can see, other critical reasons include supporting new types of planning trends, as well as enhancing overall workforce analytics. The bottom line is that there are many reasons why organizations and FP&A teams are transforming to more modern finance technology. So what are some of the steps you should think about when driving toward a digital transformation change? The following are the 5 steps to think about. So first and foremost, you need to define your team's technology requirements. And a critical piece of this step is to assess your current technology environment and determine what is challenging. And then then determine what are your team's primary requirements. Is it unification and eliminating data silos, better performance, scalability, security, automation, all of the above? Second, understand the data requirements. And Ron had mentioned, get your data house in order. Identify what's needed, define what type of financial and operational data is truly needed to effectively drive business analytics. Third, assess your team's and other stakeholders' workforce skills to effectively deploy and manage a new technology as well. In addition, is additional training required? What are your self-service requirements with a new technology? Fourth, organization culture. That's been a big theme today. Assess your organization. Assess if your organization is ready to make this transformation. This obviously is a very large piece of change management, but can sometimes be the most challenging. And finally, when ready, make sure you do some thoughtful due diligence on the type of technology you want to invest in. Your technology assessment should be based on capabilities. What are your primary features and functionality does your team need? What is going to be most valuable to your users? Self-service capabilities, etc. And finally, what are the ultimate goals and outcomes that you want to achieve from the technology? The good news is that we've already seen movement of global change makers on the next slide who have made the shift with big results. In 4 days, Christiana Care was able to pivot from an annual budget process to one that could be conducted month to month to help them manage the impacts of the pandemic on their organization and patient care. That was initially, and they've continued that over the past couple of years. Netflix, as another example, consolidated 11 disparate systems into one unified system with new technology. And this allowed them to break down the silos between IT, finance, HR, and streamline their process with enhanced automation. But these are just a few examples. And finally, by making a successful transformation to modern technology, FP&A teams and organizations should realize a ton of benefits, as you'll see, moving from a status quo state to a winning organization state, including automation of tasks, a unified technology platform for a shared version of the truth, enhanced planning technology, real-time data insights, as well as the latest functionalities, including AI and ML. As Karina mentioned, you might not be ready for AI and ML yet, but it's coming. And so really many modern technology solutions provide embedded capabilities already for AI and ML. So as a quick recap, organizations with legacy financial and planning systems should seriously consider investing now in a modern technology solution and drive toward digital modernization to reap benefits that will make them more adaptive, agile, and gain more effective data insights. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Ron.
Perfect, fantastic. Thank you, Greg. No, really appreciate you talking about that acceleration gap and just getting us all to think about where are we in that acceleration gap and how we can close it. And I love how you talked about 5 steps right from defining to implementation. You talked about some examples of behemoths in the industries, right? Saying, hey, we've done it, we've made meaningful progress. So good to see organizations that have done it. That can give us all hope, maybe if we're not on that journey. And then how do you get from status quo to automation? And you really talked about winning culture. So really, really appreciate that. Okay, right. So thank you, Greg. I'm going to invite my panel back onto the virtual stage. And while I do that, I encourage anyone, if you want to, please put any questions in the chat. We're going to move from this conclusions remarks to questions, and that's always a very interesting part of it. Okay, amazing. Thank you, panel. I'm going to now ask you for your conclusions. What would you say are actually, before we do that, let's go into one more discussion. I think this is going to be a super valuable discussion. So how can FP&A individuals develop a culture that embraces change and analytical transformation? So Pedro, why don't you start on that one?
Yeah, I'll give you the finance leadership answer. Okay, that applies to FP&A and applies basically to anyone with a leadership role in finance. 3 things probably. So first one, create an environment that empowers learning. Okay, and allows for mistakes to be made. Okay. To be made, because as you're changing things, you're not going to get it right all the time. Okay, and that is the process, right? You need to keep trying. Second is have a talent acquisition strategy that has change management and change agent at the top. Okay, when you're measuring talent that you're trying to acquire and develop, the being a change agent needs to be a core capability that you're looking for. Okay, that's from a people perspective. And then it's like in finance, it's all about most of the time about say do, right? You say something, you did something. So when it's about change, it's no different, okay? So you need to stay on course and be able to re-anchor and find alternatives. But the most frustrating part about change, and when it comes to analytical transformation, if anything, is invest 1 year on something and eventually give up at the end, okay? It's it creates a negative effect on the ability for the company to change and adapt to changes. So stay on course, have that leadership role, keep the say-do as you do in everything in life with certain degree of flexibility. So environment, talent, and keeping that say-do through an MOS and the rigor that we have are critical to facilitate and accelerate change.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Pedro. Karina, what do you think?
Yeah, I really like what Pedro said, especially about the mistakes. We need to be able to accept mistakes and we need to make them normal. They're part of the journey. Be authentic. We talked about it before, but I really want to emphasize that point again. It's so important to be authentic and to really mean the change. We need all of the leaders to be bought into the change first if we want other people to adapt to the change, and then be open. Listen, hear ideas. People, there's so many ways to approach change. There's so many reactions to change. Some love it, some hate it. Some just want to do what they've always done. Everything is okay. We need to pick people up where they are and take them with us from there and not force them into a starting point.
Thank you, Karina. Greg?
Yeah, I think if FP&A teams and individuals can be perceived as true partners with other stakeholders within the organization across the board, I think that will facilitate change a lot. And I think from my selfish perspective, I think technology can facilitate that, where they're not perceived as just number crunchers and rolling up in financial reporters and things like that, but really true partners that can drive, key change, forecasts, plans, business plans, performance, etc. And I think that will be successful as well.
Amazing. Thank you all. Okay, so just to recap what we did, I talked about key ingredients. Karina talked about the importance of change management. Pedro talked about a 5-step process to analytical transformation, and Greg talked about digital modernization. So I'd love to just get my amazing panel just kind of your quick feedback. What is one, before we get into the Q&A, what is one key takeaway, or what is your key takeaways from this webinar? So Karina, I'll start with you.
My key takeaway that it's not easy. If it would be easy, you would all change all the time, which is also not necessarily the desired outcome, but it's not easy. It's a journey. There are so many ways to get it right. There's definitely not one way. And we just need to be acceptance of the journey and not lose focus of what the end goal is. That's just my key takeaway.
Okay, perfect. Pedro.
Yeah, I think it's clear after this conversation that it's not an option. It's just you can decide how fast and to what extent you adopt and adapt to change, but it's not an option anymore for anyone. And that is about the people, the core part of the change process. So people usually feel before they think. So you need to have a balance of the emotional and the rational part of the change process, because motivation is equally or much more important when you're doing change than being right. So if you keep those two things in mind, it's not optional and people is at the core, you're going to be successful most of the time.
Amazing. Thank you, Pedro. Greg.
Yeah, agreed. The world is unpredictable. The markets are unpredictable. Competitive environment is going wild. And so FP&A teams have to become more agile and adaptive and meet the change. And one big way to do that, in addition to culture and everything else we talked about, is through technology as well.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all. Okay, so I think that's a nice bridge to our Q&A section. And Greg, I'm going to ask you this question first. Okay, so how do you keep your organization agile in case it is comprised by multiple legal entities, having its own legacy systems, ERPs, for example, as well as accommodating for future acquisitions?
Right. So my perspective is you have to move to what we call a modern technology system that is unified and will create a shared vision of the truth for everybody within the organization, and will allow you to allow everyone to be kind of connected with unified data, break apart the silos, and two things. One, and two last things is that if you're in an organization, multinational, that has multiple ERP systems, which might have been which might have been occurred because of M&A or what have you, that's okay. But as long as you have some sort of unified system that can integrate with those multiple different ERP systems and structures and things like that, you'll still be okay. And M&A is a fact of life, but I think if you have a unified modern technology system, I think you'll be good. One that has scalability and performance. We've worked with many larger organizations that are able to continue down a path of being successful.
Okay, perfect. I think I'm going to ask Pedro the same question. I mean, I think you've gone through a pretty detailed example. You talked about 100 business units and stuff like that. So how do you remain agile as well as prepare for future acquisitions, and different ERP systems? Would love your thoughts on this question as well.
Yeah, first the short answer for acquisitions. I mean, what we do normally in Honeywell, for instance, in my company, what we're thinking about acquisitions is that as part of the acquisition business plan, we have the integration plan in place and budgeted. Okay, so every business that you acquire, it has to have a roadmap to be into the common BRP in less than 18 months or in an 18 months horizon. Why you do that? Because it's easier to do that than to wait 10 years, have all the processes on all the motions, and then try to put everyone into a standard platform. It's much easier, although it might be counter-logical at the beginning, that it is better to do it upfront. Okay, so that way you minimize the problem for the future. Then when it comes to staying agile on 1,000 different company goals and 100 different business units, beside the example that we provided, is that you need to be balanced when you're making those calls. Okay, at a record keeping and transactional level, yes, you need to be in a common BRP system or as common as possible. But then there are many problems that you can solve through information being exported into a data lake, and that data lake being interrogated by other tools. So you don't need to have everyone doing the same thing and transacting exactly the same place in order to be able to manage the information that is a result of that. So you gotta keep that balance as a leadership tip. Be brave to say, hey, we're not gonna make this effort. We can just simply dump everything over here and use that data lake for the problem we're trying to solve. And obviously, be watching of the tools that are in the marketplace. Is always so much faster and agile to use something that is already available with a little configuration that being created in your own tools.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Greg and Pedro. So, Karina, I'm going to ask you the next question. So before I do that, there's a fantastic comment from Hector. There are no failures, only learnings. The proper mindset is to operate with a continuous improvement style where we either succeed or learn. The greatest learnings have been generated from downfalls. So really appreciate that super insightful comment. Okay, so question for Karina. So studies show that only when psychological safety exists can people feel comfortable enough to experiment and utilize their creativity. That is a challenge when a new change is coming and there are so many unanswered questions, especially WIFM, what's in it for them? How have you maintained your culture that embraces change when psychological safety is rocked, introducing change uncertainty and stress into the ecosystem? So quite a mouthful, but a great question. Karina, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I really think that it's so important, like the psychological safety aspect, the cultural aspect. And again, there's no perfect way. Mistakes are being done, and the importance is to go back on them and fix them and repair to provide that safety, right? And I think I always tell my team, when there's bad news, when there's mistake, the first reaction we should show is love and empathy. Like, no one is there to get up in the morning and say, I'm going to do a mistake today. Like, I'm really excited about this. Everyone wants to do their best. We always need to have the best assumptions in mind, and just keep love and empathy, empowerment, and make sure everyone feels safe as much as we can, and that everyone is okay with uncertainty. A big part of change is uncertainty. There's not a single person in the company who has all of the answers for every individual at every given point. And we need to work with our teams to be okay with that uncertainty and focus on what we can control and let go of the rest to make sure we don't get distracted by all the noise while we're trying to drive change.
Yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful answer to talk about the transparency of leadership, and also be open to when things don't go right, how do we, correct from it and be okay with, hey, control what you can control with the information you have in front of you. Okay, so next question, and I think I'm going to start with Greg on this one. So how can the integration of FP&A, AI, and machine learning be hindered by the cultural transformation with a conservative company?
I think just based on the fact that it's a conservative company, right? Not willing to change and embrace AI and ML, which is coming. Karina mentioned it up front really nicely that AI and ML is there. They see it. If her team sees it, they're not ready to use it yet, but thinking about use cases of where it might become applicable in the future and then embrace it. With a conservative company, not willing to embrace that change, not willing to maybe, and sometimes it has to do with data security, things like that, or accuracy of what AI and ML can bring. But I think the thinking about what the use cases could be should hopefully power a more conservative company into thinking about using it, or at least thinking about some use cases where it might be used. Could be now, could be 2 years from now, whatever. But that technology is coming, and I think the forward-looking organizations are going to be out front using it pretty heavily pretty soon. So
amazing. Pedro, I'd love your thoughts on that as well, right? A big conservative company, how would you get that moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, AI is going to be like another resource, okay? It's not that, at least not in the short term, you're going to say, hey, I'm going to ask the AI engine to give me my forecast. That's not going to happen. It's going to be baby steps that you start by trying to answer certain problems that it takes a lot of time to answer because of the complexity of the data that needs to be managed and all the different alternatives that need to be considered. So first, I think that the first thing is going to be demystify the AI, because people is thinking, oh, I'm going to give control of my company to an artificial intelligence engine. That's not what we're talking about, okay? At least not for now, and probably not in the coming decades. So once you get that sense of clarity, what you're saying is that I'm going to find to you a more efficient way of running a scenarios, a more efficient way of solving this problem, and let that to start becoming natural, right? But it has to be understood like another resource, not their resource, and it's not taking over from the people that you have in place. Actually, to be complementary, to offload and let the organization run better. So I don't think that even conservative or aggressive companies are against that.
Amazing, thank you very much. Okay, Karina, I'm going to ask for super quick answers to this question. So
the super quick answer
sorry, Karina, sorry, just to clarify, I'm going to ask you another question, but I want a super quick answer, okay? So in a practical way, what does it take to evolve FP&A people from doing only descriptive to more predictive analytics?
So I was cutting out, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, so we want to move from descriptive to predictive analytics. So literally your 15 to 20-second answer on that.
Okay, so I think the very quick answer on that is find what you want to solve for, find the problem you want to solve, and then get the data to get there to be more predictive. We like to look backwards, because that's the way we have the data. Look forward, find your goal, your problem, and then work your way there. There's a 15-second answer.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. And I really appreciate the amazing questions that were asked by participants and the answers, so really appreciate it. Okay, so I really have enjoyed this webinar. Thank you to my panel. I want to just go through a couple more housekeeping items. So the next webinar, so July 12th, the latest trends and developments in financial planning and analysis, and really the cutting edge with the 2023 global survey results. There's a fantastic maturity model. This will be in the deck. Really encourage you to take a look at it. And really, this is about how do we get to the leading edge when it comes to FP&A as well as business analytics. And once again, I really want to thank Workday for making this webinar possible. And a special thanks to our Ukrainian admin team for organizing this webinar. So last but not least, really would love you to be part of the FP&A Trends community. The FP&A Trends Digest, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, you can find us everywhere. But once again, thank you to my amazing panel. And thank you to all the attendees for making this a fantastic webinar. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.